How will the Fed and the White House handle all of this indignation over inflation? Joining me now is former investment banker and War on Small Business author Carol Roth and the Expert Press CEO Dave Maney. Carol, I want to go ahead and start with you because I watched that speech on Friday from California. The president, it was a doozy of a speech is the best way that I really could put it. But I think Bret Baier said it very well when he said the president keeps getting up to the podium and essentially appears more and more disconnected from reality with every day that passes. He continues to blame the inflation problem on Vladimir Putin when it started much longer before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It actually started with the president's inauguration.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a record high, 40-year record high on inflation in January, way before we had anything that had to do with Russia, Ukraine on the record. And it's really frustrating, Jackie, because, normally, I'm a Milton Friedman fan. I understand monetary policy and its effect on inflation. But given the supply constraints we've had, given the fact that they tried to power cycle this economy, the president actually holds the cards here. If he did a 180 on energy policy, that is the way that we are going to bring inflation down. It would send a signal to the market in the short term. It would shore up long-term economic and national security. Unfortunately, that's the one thing that can save us, and that's the last thing he's probably likely to do.
It is the last thing he's likely to do. In fact, he wants to take a trip to Saudi Arabia to try to coerce the Saudis and OPEC to pump a little bit more oil to help us out here. But Dave, I want to get your thoughts on the Fed and its role in all of this. I mean, to me, it feels like the Biden administration has essentially dumped this massive problem in Jerome Powell's lap at this point. A half a point hike on Wednesday after the previous half a point hike, the market might have priced that in. But if Jerome Powell needs to act more swiftly, which is what the inflation numbers are saying to this market, why we sold off Friday, why we're selling off today, the picture could be a lot uglier. What do you think is going to happen?
It's hard to say. I mean, we're clearly in for raises and more raises. There was a great line. I was looking at an old government report about how the government handled the post-war inflation from World War II. And there was a line, and it was a backward-looking analysis, and they said the problem is that the government is using heavy artillery to try to swat flies. That essentially this problem is not one that you can really address subtly. And so you just use these massive tools that can obviously go too far or explode in the wrong directions. And so I think this thing of what is the exact quarter point difference it's going to make? It's like in the end, it's going to be human beings based on imperfect information guessing. And I think that's all any of us could do right now is guess, right, whether it's a half point or 3/4.
And Carol, back to you, because if you think a recession is coming down the pike, there are many who believe we're in a recession right now. I mean, whether it's a half a point or 3/4 of a point, as Dave is pointing out, and this continues to go on for 10 more meetings to really try to tame this inflation. The worry, as Mark Tepper put it before, of the market essentially is that inflation isn't going to be slammed down to that 2% level. We're going to still be living with elevated inflation for quite some time, and that really has an impact on the average American.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, sort of the foundation of the issue here. The Fed has a bunch of tools to tamp down demand, but we are supply constrained pretty much everywhere in the economy. We're supply constrained in labor, in food, in housing, in energy, and in commodities. And so the only way using these, quote unquote tools that you can kind of close that gap is with utter carnage. And then, like you said, we still may not see, that inflation going down right away. So it's a very ugly position to be in. And unfortunately, the tools that are out there, the heavy artillery that David just alluded to, isn't the right kind of thing to get this done.
Yeah, and Dave, you look at the markets today, down 720 points. The Dow is off its session lows, but this is still setting up to be a pretty brutal day for the stock market after a brutal day on Friday. If you look at the markets year to date, the picture is brutal as well. Somebody on our show said to me this morning, I hope that this is the end of it. Unfortunately, I think this is just the beginning. I wonder what you think.
Well, once again, I mean, if I had that perfect crystal ball, I'd probably be in a different place in time. I do think that suggestion of kind of looking at it and saying what would actually kind of reverse it right now would be something that's probably almost certainly not going to happen. But imagine the power of a President Biden saying, look, we have these environmental goals, but people are suffering. The poorest people, my core voters, are suffering. And we are going to have to delay the implementation of this aggressive green agenda. And here's what we're going to do instead. It's better than me going and asking bad actors in Saudi Arabia and Venezuela to do more to hurt the environment over there. The signal of that and the power of that would probably snap us out of much of the current distress.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that there's no possible way that that's going to happen.
I hear you. I don't think he's going to do that. And even if he did do that, we've lost a year and a half of investment and traction, right? There's a lag time before you actually see an impact. And so that really is a massive issue as well. We let it go so long that we've dug ourselves into a hole. Carol, Dave, great to see you both. You'll be back later. I want to take a quick look at the markets right now as the S&P does sit in bear market territory. Back with me, former investment banker and War on Small Business author Carol Roth and the Expert Press CEO Dave Maney. Great to see you both again. Carol, let's start with you. We've paired our losses here, down 592 points, but still not a great day for the stock market ahead of the Fed's meeting and rate decision announcement on Wednesday. Your thoughts on how investors are digesting all the news we're getting? Gas prices over $5, inflation at a 40-year high, and just what people are feeling out there with respect to the worry about recession.
Yeah, I mean, I am right now, Jackie, a Chicago bear. And I think that in terms of the Fed and the economic backdrop, we're seeing the market digested in a way that's consistent with multiple compression. What we haven't seen yet is a change in terms of valuations based on earnings. Earnings are still projected at about 10% for this year and just about that for next year. So, not only do we have the Fed meeting, but going into the months ahead, we're going to get Q2 results. I think at that point in time, we're going to end up seeing the CEOs bring down some of that guidance for this year and next year, given the economic backdrop and the overall backdrop. And unfortunately, I think that means we have further to go.
And that's a problem. And Dave, I keep putting you on the spot, asking you to take out the crystal ball, but I'm going to do it again and ask you when you expect to see that kind of tipping point, because we've heard from Walmart, we've heard from Target, things have been a little bit rough. We've got companies already bringing some of the guidance down, but it's not widespread. At a certain point, it will become more pervasive.
I think that's right. I mean, there's no question that consumers are now feeling this pinch. And like all things in our economy, they take some time to kind of work its way through the snake. So anything that's got consumer components, it seems to me, is going to start to show up. It's really been over the last, it's a sort of 90 days that people have really begun to feel that something's off track here. You can see it in real estate listings and housing markets. You can see it in just lines or lack of lines at the grocery stores and stores. The market is always one part of it's looking down the road, and you're right, the second part's reacting to kind of current news. But I think that the market's crystal ball and the players on the market's crystal ball is more efficient than mine. So in some ways, they're probably already thinking through those earnings compressions and may have priced that in already.
Yeah, and Carol, we've talked about food prices. We've talked about gas prices. Madison Allworth was on the program before from Newark International Airport talking about some of the tourism trends we're seeing, the CDC lifting those international COVID restrictions. Maybe we'll get some more tourists, into this neck of the woods. But having said that, with prices so high, it does make it difficult for people to travel. And I'm wondering if that will be where people start to pull back first. The travel, the discretionary trips, it's summertime, or maybe they'll just push through it this summer and take the pain on the back end. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm betting a little bit of this sort of last hurrah. There is so much pent-up demand, and we are seeing the switch from goods to services. So I think there are a lot of people who just feel like they need to have this. They haven't gone on vacation in 2 or 3 years. They need to do those things, and they're willing to spend. But I think when we look at the consumer spending numbers on an inflation-adjusted basis, which is what we're going to look at for GDP, that is not going to make up the difference.
Yeah, it's tough. People people want to live. They want to live and enjoy their lives, especially when they're working hard. Guys, thank you so much. Good to see you both as always.